We do this job so that we can have a life, that we can pay our bills and have a home and that kind. And I was like, it was such a mental shift for me
Mm-hmm.
in the way that I grew up versus, the way that I now choose to live my life is that my family is first. Because
Yes.
another friend of mine, he once said, work will never love you back, Diane. It'll never love you back. And I was like, ooh, you know.
Are you ready to unlock your full potential and achieve your personal, professional, and financial goals? Welcome to Remarkably Simple, the podcast dedicated to helping you do just that. I'm Moneke Fields, and I believe that with the right strategies, anyone can achieve remarkable results. Whether you're a seasoned leader or just starting a business, this podcast is your guide to achieving your goals with simplicity and efficiency. Let's embark on this journey together and make success simple. All right, everybody, Moneke Fields here again, and I'm excited to introduce you to a wonderful guest on the Remarkably Simple show today. Dianne Acuna Andree is an accomplished and very well-educated, dynamic, and energetic speaker and trainer who brings more than 25 years of mental health experience to the stage. Dianne is known as the burnout prevention specialist. Her passion for this work comes from having been on the brink of burnout herself and learning the tricks and tips to rekindle her passion. Dianne is on a mission to help individuals and organizations to banish burnout and make the most of this one life now. Dianne, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
I would love for you to just get us started with what's going to be a fantastic conversation, just sharing a little bit of your background and experience and what it is that you're working on.
Sure, thank you. So I actually retired from education. That was my first chapter. And I was almost a statistic in education where I almost left in the first 6 years. And the reason was that I was in the mental health field. I was a school counselor, and I didn't really learn in graduate school like how to take care of myself. How does the caregiver take care of themselves? And so I found myself on the brink of burnout. Now, I mean, true story, if I had left at that moment, I still feel like I would have done a lot of good. I had put 3 sexual perpetrators in jail by that time. There were a lot of good things that happened. But I really found myself on the brink of burnout. And this was a career that chose me. I didn't choose the career. I actually decided in high school that I was going to become a counselor. And that's because my experience with my counselor was awful. And I didn't even know what a school counselor should do, but I knew that no kid should leave a room with an adult in the educational arena and feel the way that I did. Feel like I had not been given voice, feel like I had had barriers put up for me. So this was a really important mission for me. And so to find myself on the brink of burnout was devastating. And I mean, I went so far, Moneke, as to pursue another degree. I actually went to massage therapy school. And it was during that journey that I learned about taking care of myself. And I don't mean just going and getting a mani-pedi. It's wonderful. I'm all for it, but how to truly take care of my own well-being that actually helped me to reignite my passion. And then since then, I've just been learning more tips and tricks through different certifications and opportunities that I had throughout my career. And then I started talking to people and I realized that, and there is some comfort in it, I wasn't the only one, but we are going to lose some really good people across multiple fields if we don't stop this epidemic. And that's really what it's become.
I think this is obviously what you're speaking resonates so much. And perhaps you remember from our sort of pre-discussion that I too have a long background in education and absolutely experienced a combination of things, one of which was burnout that ultimately, prompted me to start to look at what is it that I could do to take care of myself. So I love that you took your personal experience with this and sort of jumped into the work of teaching these tips and tricks to others. Now, you said you almost left education after 6 years. Tell me a little bit about what happened after you started to explore massage and personal well-being.
Right. So I started to learn how to really take care of myself, how to separate my work and my life. And I realized that my work had become my life. And I remembered a wonderful coworker I had when I first graduated undergrad. I moved to New Orleans, which is sort of like moving to a foreign country. There's things that happen there that just don't happen anywhere else. But there were no camera phones, so we'll just leave it at that. So, but no, in all honesty, my coworkers, I grew up in New York, and it was always move, 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 hustle, 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 do the next thing. And I had a coworker there who said to me, Dianne, she said, you grew up in New York where if it was due tomorrow, it should have been in 2 weeks ago. She said, you're in New Orleans now. And, this came back to me and she said, if it's due today, you might get it in 2 weeks, So it was about, and it wasn't really about that because we were always on time. But the thing was, it was about slowing down our pace. Right? Not everything is a fire. And so what happens is that, we talk about, oh, I'm stressed. But you know what? The reality, stress is good. Yes, I did just say that. Stress is good. Stress is what puts us in flight or fight. That's what actually helps us in critical situations. But the problem is we get ourselves in a mode where everything's a fire. And so our brain can't shut down. And that's when we go from just stress to the brink of burnout, right? Because it's this chronic stress that we're experiencing. And the reality is that chronic stress has some serious health implications. And I also found that in myself. I was never like sick, but like I had weird things happening, like and I realized now it was just my body trying to signal me that, hey, you're in chronic stress, sister. You need to take it down a notch. But I didn't. And the reality is, if we don't attend to the signals our body is giving us, our body will shut us down, whether for a day, a week, a month, a real illness, because your body can't fire at that level all the time. So what I learned to do is stop and say, okay, is this really a critical situation? See, we're very fortunate. Our bodies and our brains are amazing. And we have a 5-second delay between perception and action. Now, through practice, through a mindful practice or a meditation, whatever you want to call it, you can learn to expand that so that you don't automatically respond. Because when we do that, we keep ourselves in that fight or flight. So you have this 5-second delay that you can actually lengthen, right? You want to build the muscle between response, or between perception and reaction. And it is a gift that we have. And if you can learn to do that and learn to check out what's going on in your body, you can take yourself down. And then there's very specific, like short activities that you can do to, help you to calm down. We just need to calm down.
Yes. So this is so relevant because, as you said, across multiple industries, there are and it doesn't even have to be in some of the like first responder type categories. And in so many places, we find ourselves overworking, very, driven, very passionate, but losing sight of our whole well-being, not just the career part of our life, but sometimes individuals' relationships can be sacrificed, and those things undermine over time, which sort of reinforce that stress that you talk about, this sort of chronic condition that can go very quickly from, oh, I'm stressed, or it's stressful right now, to being in a constant state of overwhelm that feels like I don't have any options here and I want to quit. And I have worked with and spoken to people who, as you describe, completely shut down, which is the opposite of what they want to do.
Right.
And I think this compelling desire to contribute and make a difference and accomplish and achieve our goals is what drives us, that somehow we tell ourselves, if I just keep pushing, I'll get there, I'll get over the hump. And I think to some degree it is true, but to what you've just described, it takes very intentional practice.
Yes.
And I always throw this plug in here. It happens on just about every show. It's really simple, the practice that's required to create that space that you're talking about and to be able to expand it, that we sort of naturally have 5 seconds. And the purpose of this intentional, regular, and very simple practice is to help us build in the additional time that we need when things get tough, or perhaps when we're having, multiple demands, or whatever is the space that we need. So I love that you share sort of naturally some of the things that you've discovered to help navigate those times when, quite frankly, it is stressful. It's not your imagination. There are stressful things
Yeah.
going on. So, what are some of the challenges, I guess, or common pitfalls that you're seeing right now with the people that you work with that they're really struggling with, that are bringing them to this place of burnout?
So the biggest thing, and you already mentioned it, is people say, I don't have time. Time is finite, right? There's 24 hours in a day. We all, I mean, we all get the same amount of time, but some people are utilizing it better than others. And I'm not saying anyone's wasting time, because you also touched on this. We get so overwhelmed that we shut down. And
Yes.
when we shut down, that's when we lose productivity. But the reality is, if we take care of ourselves in little bits and bites, we actually have more to give. There's you probably remember that book because it was so big in education, is about filling your bucket.
Mm-hmm.
But the reality is, we all get depleted. We do. But we go, and like I said earlier, I have nothing against Manny Patty's, actually really a big fan. The facial, bring it on, give me a spa day. But that puts drops in our bucket, right? And then what happens is we put a few drops in, we're like, okay, and next thing we know, we spill it all. And now we're at a deficit again. And so what we need to learn to do is first fill our own bucket, right? It's sort of like they talk about on the plane. Put your oxygen mask on first before you help others. You have to fill your own bucket, and you can't count on external things to do that. You have to do it. And then what happens is, if you stay full, then you can give from the overflow, and you actually have more to give. So you're more efficient in your work, you're more present with people. And the reality is, burnout is mostly, when you look in the literature, it's mostly tied to the workplace. But the reality is, there's nothing that doesn't get affected by it. Right? Because if I'm burned out at work, I have nothing to give to the people at home. For me, one of the things I realized in some of the changes that I've made over time is that, at one point I was in a school district where I was in charge of the mental well-being of like 190,000 kids. But the one that I had by birth at that time, I only had one at home, and that's before my bonus kids. I'm like, the one that I'm most responsible for was getting the least of me. And I thought, this isn't okay. This is not okay. I've got to do something different. So I will say that too, like just because early in my career, I learned the tips and tricks. Was I perfect at utilizing them all the time? No, but at least I started to catch the warning signs, and I'm like, whoop, got to pump the brakes here, right? And it goes back to that coworker of mine. She once said, you grew up in that you live to work. She goes, here we work to live, right? We do this job so that we can have a life, that we can pay our bills and have a home, and that kind. And I was like, it was such a mental shift for me in the way that I grew up versus, the way that I now choose to live my life, is that my family is first. Because another friend of mine, he once said, work will never love you back, Dianne. It'll never love you back. And I was like, ooh,
That's a powerful phrase, right?
yeah. I mean, and I was like, okay, I've got to keep this in check. So, you really have to decide what is a priority, because if everything's a priority, nothing's a priority. And so your health and your family, right? And for a lot of people, their faith, those should be your top three. Whatever your spirituality is. For some people, that's going to church or temple or mosque. For other people, it's going to be and commune in the woods and hike. Whatever it is for you, you need to keep the priorities, because the other things will fail and fall. So you want to make sure that while you're being effective at work, and the way you really do that is by taking time to fill your own bucket, so you have this time to give. The other day I posted, my husband's like, come on, we just need to go and take a sunset cruise. We're very blessed to have a sailboat. He's been sailing for 40 years. And I was like, like I had this to do and that. And I went, and I was like, and I came home and I was productive. And while I was there, I was able to be creative. Right. And I was able to think about things and sort things. Things just came to such clarity. Now, for me, that's the water. I grew up near the water, and the water is like where I get my heartbeat. preferably an ocean, but I'll take a lake because that's what I have access to. So you have to figure out what it is for you, and that is going to fill that bucket so that you can give from the overflow. Because if we're depleted, we're useless. And don't, again, as I said earlier, it's not just at work, it affects every aspect of your life.
So this brings up for me two ideas. Excuse me. One of the biggest ones, one of the biggest mistakes that I remember making is being in school leadership, thinking that quick fixes would work. And I absolutely had a phase because I'm not really a hair, makeup, and nails person, where
Right.
I thought, wow, things have been really stressful. Let me just go get a massage. Let me, do something to treat myself. Go shopping. And everybody has a different type of therapy. But what I found over time is that those things had a lessening degree of effect. At some point, it just didn't matter. I didn't need anybody to rub my feet or my hands. It was not going to be relaxing or have any noticeable impact, beyond the moment. And so I think back to what we were talking about with regular practice, regular exercise, whatever it is that is grounding us, spending
Mhm.
time to be in quiet reflection. One of the practices that I do daily is to write out my gratitude. That's something that I need to do every single day to keep the things that are the priorities in perspective. Because I think, as you said, it's one thing to pour your heart out, but it really does need to be full. When you
Yeah.
pour your heart out and your heart is half empty, it has a tremendous effect, like you said, on you and everything around you. But
Mhm.
when you're giving from this full place, completely well resourced in all of the areas of you, what you give has, I would call it like an exponential potential to
Mhm.
impact those around you
Yeah.
and maintain the things that are your priorities. So I love that you highlight this. The second thing that stood out to me that I also remember that I struggled with in my early administration days, and for sure when I transitioned from assistant principal to principal, that sort of leap from assistant extraordinaire to CEO of everything with no VPs, that
Yeah.
condition.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's so important, and I talk about this a lot, that we can be very much on autopilot and not intentionally giving awareness to what we're thinking and patterns that we're developing. One of
Mhm.
my favorite things to encourage people to do is to just notice how they're thinking and responding internally to what's going on. Because very often we're telling ourselves lies. We're making up
Yes.
stories that are not true about our circumstances.
Or
And
excuses. Hmm.
right. And very often we're deciding on a conclusion when many other options could be true. And this, I think, exacerbates the stress that we feel and sort of accelerates or, makes deeper this path that we're taking toward perhaps overwhelm and burnout. So I definitely appreciate what you just described about just learning to take this time and be in these moments, and for sure filling our bucket. It seems, like an overplayed idea, but it can't be understated how important this is. So knowing that people have some of these common challenges, what are the ways that you are finding that are most successful in terms of helping the people that you support to
Right.
incorporate practices like the ones we've been discussing into their daily personal life and their work life?
So the first thing I'll say, and this goes back to like what are the challenges people have? And again, I said time, but when I need to be clear that while I would love to see everybody exercise for 30 to 45 minutes a day, while I would love to see people have a 20-30 minute mindfulness practice, right? And that is sort of like the skewed version of what really you need to do, because everyone says, oh, well, I can't sit still for 20 minutes. I can't bend my legs like that. Well, and sit in a yogi position. You don't actually have to, right? You just need to start. And, so I was working with one young lady and she's like, but my mind just wanders. And I said, then you're doing it. She's like, what? I'm like, the fact that you notice that your mind wanders is part of the practice. See, there's this image that my mind is going to be fully clear and I'm going to be in this Zen place. You can get to the Zen place, but it doesn't mean your mind's fully clear. What you're looking to do is learn to, for example, sit and like I say, ground yourself. A simple way to ground yourself, whether at home or at work. I actually used to do this in my car before I left my parking spot, before I got on the road, because I had a rough commute and I needed to be fully present because, I didn't want to have an accident. I mean, Atlanta highways are dangerous.
Mhm.
So, and people are angry. People are angry on the road. So I needed to be calm. So you can just sit. And you could do this right now, Moneke, and you can keep your
Mhm.
eyes open. You can do it closed. Please, people, if you're ever driving, don't close the eyes because you actually can still do this open. But be aware of one thing. For example, if I'm driving, I can say, all right, I just need to be conscious of my hands on the wheel. What does it feel like? Is there sun coming through the windshield? Is that warming my hands? Is the steering wheel warm? Is it smooth? Is it bumpy? And I can kind of like, just do that and be there in that sense. You sitting in your seat right there, I will walk people through a short little practice where I say, okay, feel your seat and feel your bottom in the seat. Have your feet on the floor. Where is your back touching? You could touch the arms of the thing. You could touch a table. Is it cool? Is it warm? Is it smooth? And just bringing yourself into the present moment. And that's why on my website, I have my famous 30-second reset. Because if you can just focus yourself for 30 seconds, it is amazing how you can and I suggest that people do this before they go into an important meeting. Actually, I shared these practices with my sister, and she does it with her team. She's like, guys, we've all just been running, and they're all virtual. So she's like, we're running meeting to meeting. Let's just take 30 seconds here, and she'll walk them through one. And it is amazing. And she said the first time she did it, she invited them to do it. She's like, you don't have to, or you could just sit quietly if you don't want to participate. She said her chat was lighting up, her email lit up. Thank you. Thank you so much for giving me a moment. So it can be that simple. It can be, and this is another one of those between that 5 seconds. There's probably somebody in your workplace, could be at your home. I live with teenagers, where they can, kind of spark you up, right? So you can just stop and grab your water, right? But don't just take a sip. Really like the water is cool. It's going into my mouth. I feel it across my tongue. I feel it going down my throat. I feel it going down. I'm going to let it settle. That can buy you 10, 20, 30 seconds before you respond. Because sometimes we say things that we don't mean. It's, like we can't take back the rock after it's thrown. We can't take back the hurtful word.
Mhm.
So pause. Just a simple pause is what you need to do. And just get back in the present.
I love the practicality of this because you help with distinguishing this simple practice for a beginner and a
Yeah,
more advanced person, right? Like when you've had enough practice, I'm sure you experienced this, but when you said to ground yourself, I practiced while I listened and I chose my heartbeat. It's my
Mhm.
favorite thing to focus on because I'm just thrilled that I can feel it. I can remember when I was never conscious of anything on the inside of me. But
Yeah.
this, practice, like what is it that you would teach someone? Because I've worked with people who have just been so busy that they
Right.
cannot control their breath yet. It is
Yes.
going to be work. And what you've just described is giving an individual something that's very accessible so that
Mhm.
they can grow this intentional practice. The other thing that I think is so powerful here is, to your point, time is finite, but I love the concept of quantum effect.
Mhm.
And you can look up on the internet or wherever it is that you find your good definitions. And quanta has multiple definitions, but I think that we definitely underestimate the potential of time in the sense that we immediately assume that you need a lot of it. The
Right.
concept of a quantum or quanta is the tiniest quantity of something that has potential for the greatest impact. And I agree with you, both 5 seconds and 30 seconds, which we miss all day long, have the
Absolutely.
potential to entirely change a meeting, a day, or an interaction with a loved one when you have been stressed. So this is such a powerful example, and I'm excited that people who listen to this will, just get to take away that nugget for sure. Um, Tell me this, where would people follow you to find more? You've mentioned your website and some of the work that you do. How can we get a little bit more of what Dianne offers?
Yeah, so my website is Dianne Acuna, Acuna, and because I can't put the tilde, so dianneacuna.com, DIANNEACUNA.com. And on there, there's a resources tab that has these 30-second resets. You can follow me on LinkedIn, and that's Dianne Acuna Andree. And of course, on Instagram, I do a lot of inspirational stuff, and that's Di Andre, DIANDREE 7, Di Andre 7. And I'm always trying to post inspirational things and help people just to see the wonderful in the ordinary, right? Because that's how we just make the monotony into magical moments. And so I try to live the example, and every day I give myself grace if I don't. And we move on and we start again. And that's the beautiful thing is we can always just reset, refocus, reboot. Let's do this.
And make magical moments. I love everything that is about creation because
Mhm.
along with underestimating time, we underestimate our creative ability to impact what's going on with the world around us. And as we've been talking about today, so much of that, or the large part of that, starts with what's happening inside of us and the awareness and the noticing that we give to the state that we are in. So this brings me to my two favorite final questions. So we get a
Okay.
little bit more chatting out of us. The first one is that I have this belief. I heard a question recently. It absolutely had an exponential impact in terms of my own life and practice. And I'm curious what your answer to this question would be for our audience. So we've spoken in a way that relates to all sorts of people, right? Like professionals, whatever industry you're working in. I think this conversation has been so relevant. So I'm going to ask this question in the purest form. But what is the one thing that you believe that anyone can do that after they do this thing, everything else in their life is going to be easy, and perhaps things that are easier, and perhaps things in their life that would be considered stressful, not so much? What's your suggestion for that?
That is a great question. Um, and for me, it's the power of pause, like consciously pausing. And whether that is to take a breath, or make a moment. I tell people again, they'll say, I don't have time. Of course, I want to say, put your phone down. But just just pausing. And that could be as simple as slipping off your shoes and letting your feet touch the ground to bring you back down to the present. The power of pause before we speak, before we jump into an activity. It gives us a moment. It just says, I care about myself. I care about my well-being. I'm going to pause for just a second so I can bring my best self to whatever arena, home, work, being out with friends, whatever it is. Power of pause.
I love that you use the word power with that because as you were speaking and, explaining the concept, so many different directions raced in my mind about power that this affords an individual. There's so
Mhm.
much potential there because if you are pausing for just a moment when you said, it says to me, I care about myself. Perhaps it means I care about how I show up. I care about what I contribute to the situation. Many of us have very high values and expectations for ourselves. And if we are reactive all the time, we might be giving the situation what it is asking for instead of what we require. And this power of pause is going to create a space where, we get a moment to contemplate how do we want to be in this moment, right? And tell ourselves that that's what we're going to bring. So I think there are so many other benefits that you could get from the power of pause. Just that one has me excited, and it wants me brings me to my next question and my final question, which is about transformation, because you and I share the experience that I've been burned out. I don't like to say I was on the brink of burnout and then I fell over. I was completely burned out. and have come back from that. But I wonder if it's your own story or if there is another that you've witnessed that might make this concept and what we've talked about today memorable for the listeners that you know of, where just taking this time to pause or perhaps having this intentional practice that we've discussed has really helped an individual. I would love to hear a favorite story of transformation that you know.
Um, I think I can. So I was lucky enough to be able to bring this into the workplace. I've had the opportunity to do that in my last school. And there's nothing more satisfying than having somebody to shoot you a quick, well, she actually, DM'd me and said, I want you to know that I was able to pause. And in that pause, I not only was able to think about my own response, she said, but I didn't even realize that I was diffusing the pressure that was building in our team meeting because she was the team lead. And so by her
Mhm.
pausing, everybody paused. And she said, I am so proud of myself. She said, because she said, normally whatever had transpired, she said, it would have just set me off. And she said, and I didn't let it spark a flame. And that's actually one of the tools that we use is that if you can see smoke. And if what
Mhm.
happens when you fan the smoke,
It
right?
grows the fire.
It grows the fire. And if I continue to feed the fire, it's going to become an out of control blaze. So she said, I recognize the smoke. And she said, and instead of fanning it, she said, I paused. And she said, but it not only helped me, but it helped the team. And I was able to redirect us. So I'll
Such a
take that all
beautiful
day long.
image. Yeah, all day long. And it's funny because when I'm equating the pause to just like diffusing some of that energy, it's the same thing with a fire in a candle. Like what happens if you don't give it air?
Right.
It naturally dissipates. And you're in a better position if you didn't need a fire at that moment. I remember one of the things that I used to actually learned it from a person, the principal that I had been assistant principal with. But I taught it to my staff. It's like, listen, sometimes you need a break. All I
Mhm.
need you to do is call me and say, I need a Coke. Just say, I need a Coke. I don't drink Coke. That's not the point. Just take a moment. It
Right.
happens. It's human. Making the space safe for pause, right? Like that you don't have to immediately react. I love that the person that you talked about normalized that for her team. What beautiful modeling. And as you said, diffusion of the tension. That's such an excellent example. Both a simple and very powerful practice. Dianne, this has been such a fantastic conversation, so enlightening and inspiring. And I know for sure I'll be following you. And I hope that all of the listeners today will be doing the same. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much for having me.